Hi, my name is Adam Woodhall, Chief Executive of Lawyers for Net Zero. I'm delighted to welcome you to the webinar, Delivering Net Zero, the Role of the Legal Sector, which was run in partnership with the Law Society of England and Wales. It was recorded live from the Lawyers for Net Zero stand in the COP26 Green Zone in Glasgow. Just a note that there were a few minor technical issues, which were mainly a function of the recording situation, but you should still be able to enjoy this webinar.
And I am super delighted to be welcoming you, the participants, Anthony, Rosemary, and Vessi along to join us, and of course, Alasdair Cameron, who is my co-host for today. And something just on a technical level that what we are using on a headphones level is kind of a plan C, because we'd hoped that actually these headphones, which are quite expensive ones, would actually have microphones on both ears of the headphones. They don't. So what's going to happen is when I hand over to Alasdair, I will literally hand over the headphone to him. He'll give me his headphones so I can hear what's going on. And then Alasdair will talk. And then when I'm talking, the same will happen. So we're going to be handing the baton between Lawyers for Net Zero and the Law Society on this webinar. Clearly, what we've also got is some people that are joining us. We're going to have something that's fantastic as well is Paul Watchman. You've just seen him join there. He's our bonus session that we're going to have at the end of this, which really important to mention is that Paul is our chair of the Lawyers for Net Zero Advisory Board, and he is going to be providing kind of a response to both this webinar, the webinar that we did actually earlier today, which is Finance and Net Zero, the GC's view, which we did with Legal 500. And then finally, also just a general response to what's happening at COP26. So I am really happy that we've got to minute 3 and we don't appear to have had too many technical failures, which is great because obviously we're doing this in a bit of a kind of a slight wing and a prayer because obviously we arrived on this site today live from the Green Zone at COP26 in Glasgow. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction about what Lawyers for Net Zero is, and then I will hand the ear baton over to Alasdair. So Lawyers for Net Zero is an organisation that is focused exclusively on in-house counsel, because we see that in-house counsel have an unusual opportunity to be able to influence the net zero agenda in a very positive way. So that's why I'm so delighted that we've got 3 in-house counsel that are going to be joining us through this panel. And then at the end, as I say, we have a non-in-house counsel, but somebody who's a very learned person, Paul Watchman, who will be joining us to discuss the general views of what's happening in net zero. So we'll be going into a little bit more about what Lawyers for Net Zero is, both in the middle of this session and also a little bit at the end. But I think that's enough from me at the moment. I would like to now hand over to Alasdair to do a quick introduction. So I'm going to hand over the ear baton to him.
Not so fiddly. It's okay. Yeah, we can hear me. Thank you so much, Adam. And it's a pleasure to be here today at COP26. We've got the Finance Day today, and arguably this is perhaps one of the most important days for solicitors. Looking at the outcomes that we're going to achieve at COP26, hopefully today will enact exactly what Adam was talking about and what we're hopefully going to be discussing today with the vital role that solicitors play within, transitioning towards net zero. So I work at the Law Society within the policy team on climate change. Now, the Law Society has been working quite fervently over the past couple of months to kind of accelerate its agenda on climate action. And the first part of that was a climate change resolution, which we're going to talk about a wee bit later on. But yeah, I think now that we've passed the first 5 minutes, it would be great to introduce our panelists and get the conversation going. So I think it would be good firstly to hand over to Anthony, and he can introduce himself And yeah, please, Anthony, introduce yourself.
So I'm a corporate lawyer at GSK, so I do corporate work and M&A, but also I've been fortunate enough to also be involved in some of the work we're doing in relation to, well, ESG very broadly, and including human rights, but recently also climate-related work. So, for example, I think last week or the week before, we announced that GSK is in the process of building a solar wind farm that will power one of our big plants up in Irvine. That's an example of some of the work that I've been lucky enough to do. So yeah, very happy to be part of Lawyers for Net Zero. I think it's a great initiative, which we're going to hear more about today.
Great. Rosemary, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Rosemary Martin. I'm Group General Counsel at Vodafone. We too have been working hard at Vodafone to ensure that we've got science-based targets, that we have a net zero target ourselves, and to introduce climate transition clauses into many of our agreements to make sure that we're pushing forward into the supply chain as much as we can as well. I got involved interested in climate matters really because I guess it's partly out of a sense of guilt. I want to make sure that we hand over to our children and their children a world that's worth living in. And I feel as lawyers we have a role to play in many different ways to do our part in making that climate transition happen as smoothly as possible. So perhaps I can hand over to Vesselina.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Adam Alazar, for the invitation. It's great to be here with you. I'm a Senior Counsel at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So this is a regional development bank with a very clear green and climate. I also have been a member of the working group on climate change with the Law Society for the last year. And in terms of my involvement, as I mentioned, I think it became very natural as I'm an in-house lawyer working at an international financial institution based in London with a very ambitious climate change commitments. And it's also one of the key providers of climate finance to emerging markets and developing economies. Throughout my practice and my years at the bank, I became involved in the preparation of our strategic green and climate policies, in the strategies as well as implementation. And I'm fortunate to have also the freedom to initiate and to start new policies and legal and corporate governance initiatives. And we have seen their impact in our country's operations and in our engagement with clients.
Great stuff. And then actually, Vessi, following up, what do you feel is a characteristic or more of what is a climate conscious lawyer?
Sure. Climate conscious lawyer, for me, is three major things. I think first is to be aware of the impact of climate change on one's client, the business, the assets of the clients, or in case as lawyers, our employer. This requires a commitment to ongoing learning, to ongoing professional development, and staying up to date with evolving policy and regulatory environments. I think it also means taking account, being responsible and taking account of one's professional advice and what is the impact of this advice on the broader public good objectives. How do we define public good objectives? I will go ahead to establish that you can define it by referring to relevant policy and legal instruments, including the International Climate and Sustainability Commitment, as well as in the UK, the national commitments and the nationally determined contributions. I think finally, for me, a climate conscious lawyer is a lawyer that wants to be more proactively engaged and involved in tackling climate change, one who wants to be a leader rather than a follower.
That's great. And so, Rosemary, what would you say is a climate conscious lawyer?
Yes, I agree very much with what Bessie has said, and I liked her piece about being a leader rather than a follower. Although followers are more than welcome too. I think really the issue is that as lawyers, whatever kind of lawyering we're doing, and that's one of the great things about our profession, it's so broad, but whichever part of the profession we're working in, I think we should all be taking some time to think about what can we do to play a role, even if it's a very, very small role, in helping society to change the way it lives and what we do and what we require of each other, to make sure that we are addressing these huge risks that we're facing today. And there's a lovely quote that I heard back in March in a speech that was given by one of the former Supreme Court judges, and he was saying that law has the position of being between the clear science that has been laid out for us by the scientists and political will. And he was saying that law can be that bridge between the scientific facts and the political and social will to act. And I think we have to play our role in doing that, partly through laws, regulations, legislation, the public law that Vessie was talking about, but also through the obligations we put on each other through private contracts, which is what a lot of solicitors and other lawyers spend a lot of their time actually working on day to day.
Great stuff. And then Anthony, what would you add or kind of resonate with?
Well, I certainly resonate with everything that's been said by Rosemary and Vessie. I mean, what I'd add is that I think there's multi-dimensions to this, and I think it's also recognizing that, you know, net zero, which is a subset of climate change, which is a subset of the ESG agenda, I think as an opportunity for lawyers to embrace the purpose-led business, you know, direction that we need to go in. And I think we have roles to play, you know, as individuals in terms of our own lives, how we live and how we can influence that way, but also within our corporates. I mean, I think lawyers, I said this a couple of times on different platforms, but lawyers, particularly in-house lawyers, have a unique opportunity because we see and are touching all aspects of the business. So we have an opportunity to help businesses understand the landscape, which is increasingly becoming regulated. So understanding that landscape, working with each other. I think climate conscious lawyers is being aware of the other lawyers in the climate ecosystem and learning from each other and sharing from each other and helping each other and collaborating. And that extends, by the way, also to our private practice colleagues. And I think climate conscious lawyers is also just being, you know, aware of the multidimensional complexity of this issue and being, you know, courageous enough to step into it and to work about to understand it so we can shape what needs to happen going forward. Because in my experience, generally, whether it be the European Commission or, you know, parts of the UK government, they're always looking for input from industry, from lawyers, to help shape the regulations. And I think in this particular space, we need to really ideally focus globally on a global standards. And I think lawyers play an important role there. So I hope that answers your question, Adam.
No, fantastic. And I think between the three of you, covered a lot there. Thank you. So I think the next stage is just actually to go to a quick poll, and then I'll be handing over to Alasdair to talk about the law site and its role. So the poll that we've got first is, here we go. It's what's stimulating net zero? Now, there's actually probably more, much more answers than this. So, but we've done this sort of poll before, and what we found is that there's these are some of the popular answers that we've seen come to us before. So, really keen to find out what you think is stimulating net zero in your organisation, not globally, not with you personally, but what's stimulating net zero within your organisation. So we're seeing that it looks like the internal ESG policies, well, they were streaking ahead at one point on this live poll, but it's looking like customer demand and ESG policies are currently pretty equal at the moment. And let's see if we can get a few final answers in there. So it's by a nose, it's looking as though that ESG policies, the companies, are stimulating the net zero action, and actually, but then followed relatively closely by customer demand, and then legislation and regulation. And interestingly, the investor demand is very little, and then also personal concerns. I suppose the personal concerns are naturally not going to do, but it was interesting to have in there. So I think it's quite interesting that there's as we've indicate, there's lots more things which are stimulating net zero, but it's clear that actually the companies are taking action with this. So I'm going to end that poll there. And then these are, so you should be seeing the results now. Sorry, I didn't realize, because I'll be honest, as well as never doing a webinar live from a conference center, I've actually never shared a Zoom poll. So I thought you could see that in real life. I don't think you probably could. But anyway, you can now. You can see the numbers that were there. So what now I'm going to do is we're going to hand the ear baton over, and we're going to have Alasdair, who's going to be talking about what is going on with the Law Society.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, well, the Law Society ultimately, as arguably the centre of gravity for the legal profession in the in England and Wales, as a central voice for solicitors throughout England and Wales, ultimately must confront the climate crisis as the greatest perceivable threat that we're currently facing as humanity. And although today we're at COP, and we must recognize at the beginning of COP, it's the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. It is ultimately, at its inception, international law. So it absolutely makes sense that solicitors should be talking about this and thinking about how they provide legal services will be changing as the climate crisis becomes more profound, and its transitionary risks and its physical risks throughout the globe. So the Law Society, recognizing this, established a climate change working group in October 2020. And as Vessi mentioned earlier, she is one of the members of this working group. And they recognized this and consequently really saw the need for the Law Society to develop a strong stance, to develop commitments, and also to guide the profession as to what exactly it should be doing in the climate crisis. So consequently, one of the first things that we have been doing is within the Law Society on climate change is a climate change resolution. Now, one may say, a resolution, we've heard a key theme throughout this COP has been, as Greta's put it, blah, 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 and action instead of purely, words. But this resolution that we published has commitments on it, as well as expectations for solicitors. Firstly, commitments for the Law Society itself. So firstly, grounded within action, it is committed itself to science-based targets in the way that it will run its business, and to develop rapid actions to do that as soon as possible. This is a big commitment for the Law Society to do, particularly as we think about, it is a very large, regulatory body, well, not regulatory, professional body, which has lots of employees. Secondly, as well, it's developed commitments to support solicitors to navigate the climate crisis. This is twofold. Firstly, in making sure they run their business in a way which is aligned with national legislative targets on climate change. And secondly, to ensure that the advice and their professional conduct is aligned with national legislative targets and the targets of the Paris Agreement itself. So, for example, one of the lines within our climate change resolution, it states, it urges lawyers to, when approaching any legal matter, take into account the likely impact of that particular matter upon the climate crisis in accordance with their professional duties. Now, that's a powerful statement, but it's one which one may say, that's a fantastic and powerful statement, but where does it lead to? And that leads into the next piece of work that the Law Society Climate Change Working Group will be doing, which is developing more detailed guidance as to exactly how solicitors navigate the moral, the ethical and professional duties as solicitors in an era marked by the climate crisis. So part of that will be developing resources. Part of that will also be developing this detailed guidance. Vessi, I'd like to hand over to you at this point as an extremely qualified person to speak on this, and also as a member of our working group. Is there anything that you'd like to add that I've not said myself?
Thank you, Alistair. Yes, just a few points. I think maybe highlights. I agree that this is a very important statement by the Law Society, and I'm pleased that the Law Society has joined other professional bodies in calling on their members to become, climate conscious solicitors. Yeah, in the words of the resolution. The resolution, I think, sends a powerful signal that to the profession that effectively means that climate change is affecting every area of law practice. I think this is, fundamentally clear message coming out of the resolution. And the other one is that it is now becoming part of solicitors' duty, in the duty to act in the best interest of one's clients, to include the climate-related risks and to be aware of the relevant material climate-related risks to their clients, and of course to take the adequate measures in order to mitigate them. So for me, of course, this in practical terms, as you mentioned, it's a statement, but this could lead and will lead, I think, to more eventually maybe stringent guides. And I'm not going to speculate this further, but I've seen this happening also in the financial industries. I could make parallels to the, for example, the voluntary initiative of the Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosure, which was a voluntary initiative driven by the industry. And then because of this pervasive nature of climate risk, this is becoming mandatory standards, especially for financial industries. What are also, for me, the key kind of messages, going forward, especially for certain sectors that are really more vulnerable to climate change risks, lawyers will have to do their own, and the Law Society will be providing, as you mentioned, for certain guides and for some, professional and relevant information sources, which is very important. And I think the other highlight is that lawyers are, as you mentioned, to provide advice on how clients to achieve their objectives in ways that mitigate the impacts of climate crisis. So this is already talking about the lawyers taking a proactive approach in guiding businesses, in making sure that businesses stay, and develop low carbon and resilient business models in order to be aligned with the national and international climate commitments. One other thing you mentioned, and that's the last one I just wanted to say, for me, the fact that the resolution refers to the science-based targets, and also that the Law Society will be guided also as a trustee in the climate action that it's committed to by a zero net or zero carbon targets and standards that are based on the latest scientific knowledge. I think this is a fundamental kind of shift in the approach the Law Society has taken so far. So this is also, very much consistent with the ambition to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And one final note, I think, also for the broader community of lawyers, the Law Society is calling for lawyers to uphold the rule of law and also ensure access to justice, also to those that are adversely affected by this climate transition. Yeah, so this is kind of the duty of the lawyer as well. While we all were, chose the profession, is to ensure just transition and being there for the ones that are less represented.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And Ves, you put it far better than myself. And one thing I always, sticks out to me, which was said, was John Kerry's comment, we're all climate conscious, we're all climate lawyers now. And that exactly indicates how climate change is this pervasive problem, which is going to intersect all issues throughout society and consequently affect all solicitors. I'm going to hand over now to Adam, who's going to,
So yes, so Lawyers for Net Zero is all about how we encourage climate conscious lawyers to really be, everybody can be an environmental lawyer, particularly those that it is in their day job. And we, as I trailed at the start, we do focus exclusively currently on in-house counsel, and that's because of obviously the integral role within the organisation, being able to champion net zero and also deliver practical action. So that would be by both asking questions, going into board meetings and project meetings and talking about it, as well as looking at kind of like contracts and clauses that you do. And how we do that is we convene a community of kind of climate conscious lawyers, in-house lawyers. We give our net zero action principles, which are a guidance tool, which you can find the headlines on our website, or if you contact us and you're interested in joining us, we can send them to you. And then also the key thing is that our champions join our action learning groups, which are a form of co-coaching process. But I thought actually the best way of you as the audience learning about actually how our champions operate is actually to talk to one of the ones. Anthony was one of our first ever champions, and in fact actually he was the first person to post about Lawyers for Net Zero publicly, even before I did. He was very much a leader in that respect. So I'm delighted to ask Anthony to share just a few moments about his experience of being a champion and what it means to kind of like take action in that way. So over to you, Anthony.
Yeah, but before I get going, I mean, one thing I wanted to comment on, Adam, is it's great to literally see you and Alistair shoulder to shoulder. Because and I think you, by the way, you just passing of the mic should be probably a going forward feature of all Zoom calls. Because I think it's important. I mean, it's you're there together, and I think the combination of the two organisations is going to be important going forward. Because I think there's a lot of common ground, and a lot of common objectives. And because when I think of Lawyers for Net Zero and why I think it's so important is I think what you've done a great job in a very short period of time, Adam, of putting together like-minded lawyers from the in-house community who are wanting to understand how they help their businesses deal with the topics of net zero and climate change. Now, different organizations are in different parts of that journey. And what's good about Lawyers for Net Zero is that those who are further down the path can help those who are getting started. And that can be from as simple as, you know, I wanted to kind of start some initiatives in my business, but don't know how. And maybe there's a lack of confidence about the conversations that can be had. And they hear about from people who are having those conversations, who to approach, how to approach them. That's kind of powerful, can be powerful. But then also you can then you take it a step further through the action working groups in terms of, well, okay, and this will become more and more as you go along, is what are the metrics? What are we measuring? What are the tools we're using? And again, you know, one of the great things about the Lawyers for Net Zero is you're pulling together a community that will share. And I'm guessing, Adam, some of it's already coming, but content as well, as we pull our thoughts and our minds together on this important topic. And I think what we also got is the principles, because I think, you know, when you join up, it's you know, they're not mandatory in some sense, but they are a commitment. You are sort of signaling to yourself that you're gonna take this seriously and try and work through the principles. And you're starting some good discussions. You know, there's some discussions around how we interact with our private practice lawyers on this topic, and that's where I think the relationship between you, Alistair, and the Law Society is going to be important, because how that gets, you know, plays through into the Law Society and regulations, and how you know, for example, if an external law firm is actively working with an organisation to counter and you know, put out false information, what are we going to do as in-house lawyers with respect to that law firm is going to be a topic to be discussed as we go forward. So I think great work, Adam. Keep it going. And for anyone listening to this, and I was lucky enough to be a part of a panel yesterday, and I said similar things, and you know, organisations came up to me afterwards and said they want to take part, and you know who those are, Adam. And so I'd encourage anyone on this call who's thinking along the same lines, jump in. The water's warm and lovely. And get involved.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. And I am genuinely not paying Anthony to say that. And actually, one of the things that you were saying leads into what is our kind of key guidance to in-house lawyers, because we do have our 5 principles, which are actually in headline: champion net zero internally, deliver rapid practical action, learn and share key knowledge, influence suppliers, and champion net zero externally, which obviously these in-house lawyers are doing already, because but the three of you are actually championing net zero externally, doing it fantastically well. But our kind of how we summarize what is the kind of key driver is to say that it's the real opportunity of an in-house counsel to help their organization guard against greenwashing and achieve a legitimate net zero. So if you want to take away one sentence, that's what we take away. And so actually what I'd like to think about is actually that one sentence that we give as a takeaway. And so I'd like to ask Rosemary to kind of comment on that sentence. And obviously I'm happy for you to kind of talk a bit more about one side or the other. So yeah, what's your take on that, Rosemary?
Yeah, I think greenwashing is a really interesting area, and it's one of those kind of sad areas of climate change. There are quite a lot of sad areas about climate change, but I think it's sad because for two reasons. One, it's sad that companies and organizations are not trusted enough to tell the truth, but they're not. Trust is low in corporations and other organizations and governments for that matter. So that's one sad aspect. The other sad aspect is that some companies and other organizations do indulge in greenwashing, i.e. telling they're economical with the truth. They tell one part of the story, but don't tell the other part, which is less digestible and less impressive perhaps, or maybe do seemingly good works in order to hide their underlying climate damage and the fact they're heading and taking the society with them in the opposite direction. So greenwashing is a problem, and without doubt, in-house lawyers and external lawyers, for that matter, advising companies do have a real role to play in challenging the statements that companies are making, whether that's on their website or in their formal annual reports or financial disclosures. I think we're seeing a lot of interest and growth in the formality around the metrics and so forth that companies are and the commitments they're making. We're seeing the audit profession looking at ways to make that information auditable. So the pressure is on companies to make sure they are making truthful and comprehensive, kind of true and fair view kind of disclosures around what they're doing and the impact they have on the climate. And that in many ways is just an extension of what in-house lawyers do all the time. We are deeply involved in the communications that a company makes to make sure that they are correct, and ensuring that in relation to climate change, ESG, TCFD reports and so forth is in many ways simply an extension of that work that we already do. But it's a complex area. And I do think there's an opportunity again for organizations like yours, Adam, to help in-house lawyers work together in understanding the different dimensions of, for example, TCFD reporting, of the kinds of data you need to be accurate, and where the problems may exist, which are often definitional, so they're kind of a bit hidden from view. And that's where lawyers can really get involved and make sure definitions, metrics, targets are properly understood, properly measured, and properly reported.
Fantastic, thank you for that. So, Anthony, you got a bit of a difficult act to follow there. I think that was quite pretty covered a lot of areas, but yeah. What would you add to that?
Well, it's just one of those great things about these kind of conversations, because listening to Rosemary, all her excellent points, I was formed to think of something else. I mean, well, first of all, to totally endorse everything Rosemary said. It's there should be, I think, as a community, we need to have zero tolerance for true greenwashing. I mean, that's got to be understood and enforced. But then it does play into a question around, well, what is greenwashing? And I think as lawyers, we also have a role to help avoid the court of public opinion going too far, to shaming people who perhaps are genuinely trying to do the right thing, but because we're still in this transition period of understanding of what the metrics are and what we're measuring, what we're trying to do, there will be some companies that are genuinely, not greenwashing, but are going to potentially be hung out by the court of public opinion, and with the reputational impact that would follow. So I think as lawyers, again, we have a role to play in terms of helping society understand what really is, as you said, Adam, legitimate net zero, and therefore what isn't legitimate and what is true greenwashing. Because I think because one of the reasons I think greenwashing is such a problem is that we have so much to do in so little time. We really shouldn't be, and I think one of you mentioned going down the wrong path, being led down the wrong path by false information, or just even wasted time and energy and mental resources of putting into something that is essentially greenwashing. Why not put that energy into actually solving the problem? So I think we just haven't got time for greenwashing. So let's not tolerate it, but let's be careful about calling out that label. Let's not overuse the label. Let's use it when it truly is greenwashing, so that it has maximum impact when we do call it out, would be my recommendation.
Well done, Anthony. You managed to lead on from Rosemary's fantastic share there. That's a really good punchy point that you make there, that we don't have time for greenwashing. We need to get on with this. Now, unfortunately, on the subject of time, we've actually obviously only got limited time, and we do want to get some Q&A at the end. So actually, we'll go on to another poll, and then we'll actually be going into, we'll get the next sort of area. So I'm going to stop sharing that poll, and then wait a second, how do I do this? So I am now slightly confusing myself because I want to do the second poll. I know how to do it. I click a button here. So I'm launching the second poll now. So the second poll is, what are the obstacles to you taking action to help your organization deliver net zero? So we have budget insufficient regulation, personal workload, customer demand, or lack of corporate strategy. So what I'd be really interested in just to get people's views, obviously as kind of advertised before, there's more answers than this, but these were some of the popular ones that we've had before. So what we are currently seeing is that personal workload and lack of corporate strategy are clearly things which are pretty popular, with budget there. There's no customer demand. People saying that customer demand is stopping them helping deliver net zero, which is good news to see. So I think we've had a minute of that open now, so I'm going to end the poll and now share the results so you can see it now. So as we can see there, personal workload and lack of strategy, and probably allied to lack of strategy is lack of budget, big problems there. So I think one of the challenges is actually, yes, because as in-house counsel, clearly you have a lot that you're doing to try and make things happen just generally in an organization. So this could be seen as just another thing to be doing. So what I am going to do is hope that I can keep my technology working well enough. Just a second. So now actually I'd like to go to kind of the final main question before we go to our Q&A. And actually I'd like to start with Vesselina, because well, we can't actually predict what are going to be the outcomes of COP26. We obviously hope that our political leaders can kind of come up with something which can both provide good guidance and inspire us as well. But we can't necessarily rely on that. And the reason why Lawyers for Net Zero was actually instigated is because there is a bit of a societal narrative that effectively, well, we need to wait for the political leaders, or we need to rely on our sustainability teams to deliver this. And actually, what the reality is that there's people like yourselves, the panel, and also many of those in the audience who've got significant influence in their organizations to be able to kind of like take action on this. So what I'd be really curious about is, starting with Vesselina, is kind of a top tip about how lawyers can take meaningful action in their work. So over to you, Vesselina.
Thank you, Adam. Yes, very valid question. Yes, I'll actions for lawyers. Maybe first start with in-house lawyers. in particular. So I think what was said by Anthony and Rosemary is what is really the role of in-house lawyer to limit or minimize the liability exposure of companies.
I think we're having problems with your. I just want to check with the other panelists. Can you hear Vesselina? Because I'm yeah, sorry, Vesselina, we're struggling with your audio. Maybe try taking out.
Do you hear me better?
Yes, we can hear you better now. So let's give that a go.
All right. Let's try this. So what I was saying is the top tips for in-house lawyers would be really to be proactive and find their place in the organization's process as contributing to the formulation and even acceleration of the company's commitments and targets. Relying on the trusted role of lawyers in advising boards, in working with senior management on raising ambition. I think that's a very unique role that in-house lawyers have.
I think we've got, unfortunately, what you said there, and unfortunately you're still breaking up. So it's okay. What we'll do is we'll just move on to Anthony now. So Anthony, what would you say is a top tip for how lawyers can take meaningful action, whatever our political leaders come up with?
I think that first of all, John. Oops, sorry, there's got an echo. Lawyers for Net Zero, join Lawyers for Net Zero, of course. But then I think don't be afraid to jump in. I mean, as what's hopefully come across through several comments today is that in many ways working on climate change and net zero is part of what we do anyway in terms of the ESG agenda or just in terms of our role. But in terms of look at perhaps for some quick wins. So for example, the Chancery Lane project has done some great work in terms of contract clauses. That's an important part of how we can manage our Scope 3 emissions, for example, in our supply base. So there's a project you can just launch into and start having immediate impact. And then as you build the momentum in the organization, you can then start to work on supporting the business in terms of the metrics and what's being measured, but that might take a bit longer because, depending on what sector you're in, that might be the sector might be further along the path than others. And I think that's the other thing. Use your industry organizations, reach out to those, get involved, collaborate. Obviously within the confines of competition law, obviously, but and then try and see what government's doing. I think CMA are launching a consultation. Get involved in things like that, and start thinking about what training you could do for yourself, but also for the organization. Either from organizations like the Law Society going forward and Lawyers for Net Zero, and/or some of the law firms which are increasingly producing some good content as well. So how can you bring that into your organization? So I think there's a lot of things you can do. I think it's just a matter of jumping in, and I think you'd be pleasantly surprised, based on my experience, and I'm sure others, that the business wants us as lawyers. They're looking for us to help them with this. I think I'd be shocked if you weren't pushing against an open door, quite frankly.
Fantastic. And then Rosemary, what would you add?
Yeah, I completely agree with Anthony, in particular his last point. I think the tide has changed a lot, and I think people would find that they're pushing against an open door, particularly amongst the younger generation of employees in a company. I mean, they really want the companies they're working for to be doing something. And if nobody else is providing that leadership in the company, absolutely, it's open for the lawyers to do so. I thought there was a lovely story, Adam, actually, you told me of one of your members who was listening to one of the law firms' webinars about climate change risk and the potential liability of companies and directors if they fail to take enough action to mitigate that risk. And he worked for a construction company, and he went back to his construction company, thought about what they were doing, thought, I think there is a risk here that we need to address more explicitly, wrote a paper on it, which he gave to the General Counsel. The General Counsel thought, he has a point, shared it with the board. And then the board asked the management to put in place a strategy for that company's approach to climate change, climate transition. And now they've got the budget. It's a pan-company initiative. And it all started with one in-house lawyer recognizing this was a risk that his colleagues in the company weren't thinking about enough. And he generated that impetus, which I think is fantastic. So people can do that if their organizations are kind of behind the curve. Many organizations now are doing a lot. And I would say, just as Anthony did, your colleagues will be thrilled if they see the legal team getting involved as well. And there are many particular things that lawyers can do in an organization, as we've discussed on this webinar, to help that general movement.
Brilliant, great stuff. So I think what he actually, the person concerned, is a great example. He actually is now got half of his time dedicated to sustainability issues. That's part of his job role now. And also he's actually produced a template board paper for our champions to be able to kind of offer to the board if they want to try and convince them to basically get more budget, to get more time. And so now I think we'll go into the Q&A because we're unfortunately fast running out of time. And actually, we've got a really good question here, which I think we'll ask to Rosemary, which has come in, which is, does the panel have any advice as to how large global legal teams can effectively structure themselves to tackle the key issue of getting to net zero, but also ESGs more broadly? So that's kind of you as a global GC, how would you recommend structuring things?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Anthony's also in a global organization, so he's probably got a view too. I would say use whatever communications medium you use in your organization. Most companies have got Yammer or Workplace or Teams or one of those collaboration tools. Set up a group for the lawyers, or join a broader group if there is one. So in Vodafone, we have two. We have one for all employees, and we have a particular one for the lawyers in Vodafone. And just start using it. And you will almost certainly find in each of your local subsidiary companies, there will be one or two lawyers who are keen to get involved and do so. Somebody talked about needing budget. I think you need budget in a company to make the energy transitions and the kind of heavy infrastructure cost transitions that are needed to become net zero. You don't need much money to generate a movement inside your organization to push for that change. So it doesn't need budget, it just needs commitment. And a lot of people do it from their own personal volition and find that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we encourage with Lawyers for Net Zero, actually join as individuals to kind of like give themselves that opportunity to take action. And so actually, just because of time, I'm going to actually ask I'm going to go to the next question, because I think you answered that pretty well there, Rosemary. And this time I'll ask this of Anthony. Law firms often cite pressure from their clients to adopt better D&I standards and policies. In your view, how can in-house lawyers apply similar pressure to their panel law firms to promote strong commitments and action to reach net zero?
Yeah, so I don't think we're there yet, but I think what you're going to see happen, because for just on D&I, for example, as part of our process, we do reverse auctions and have a tender process, and as part of that, law firms have to submit the breakdown of their team, and then we score it in terms of D&I. I think what we're going to see going forward, and I think some people are already there. Certainly, Bloomberg seems to be along that track, is building into those tender processes questions around, well, what are you doing? And I guess there's two main bits to that. What are you as a law firm doing for net zero? What's your carbon footprint? And what are your policies? And demonstrate those. And one question might be also, what kind of work are you doing with your clients? Which kind of, I guess, potentially goes to kind of scope 3 type questions, but also could broaden out to what are you doing, what kind of work are you doing with your clients, and those things will be scored, and I think those things will then, you know, shape what panel law firms we work with going forward. So yeah, I think it's so. For example, GSK is not a criteria at the moment, but I could see it becoming one.
Yeah, very good. I think that's very valid, and it's time. Like, you know, 3 years ago, even we wouldn't be where we are now with D&I, and especially 5-6 years ago, we were nowhere near it. It wasn't even really talked about. So actually, I've got the microphone at the moment, so I'm going to use that kind of chairman's rights to be able to actually, it was something that Alistair brought up in our pre-call, because Alistair asked a really good question. Is there anything that we haven't covered? And then actually the thing that was prompted was a concept around collaboration, and how do we collaborate more? So what we're going to see is if we can collaborate with Vessi, and how her mic is doing. So Vessi, how would you say that lawyers could be working towards collaboration better? Let's give your mic a go.
No.
Let's give it a go. Let's give it a go.
All right. Yes, I agree with what has been said. I think it's definitely very helpful for lawyers to learn from other colleagues, ones who probably have more experience in leading or kind of formulating net zero commitments in their organization. So I think there is a lot of scope for collaboration, and there is a clear role, of course, for the law society to play, convening various organizations, and working with the net zero, because they are the voice of the profession, effectively. If I can use this and say one quick point I want to raise in terms of the role of the lawyer.
Unfortunately, I think the microphone is kind of breaking down a bit. So we've got one good point there. I got that point. So we'll go to actually, because we've got a couple of minutes before I want to start wrapping up, and I do want to give Alistair a bit of time to talk about law society going forward. So if we can have 30 seconds each from Anthony first, and then Rosemary second, on collaboration. What would you say about that?
So 30 seconds, I'd say let's scale it up. I mean, one, I think we need to collaborate. We can collaborate across industry, within our industry. We should collaborate across industry as a profession. Do that in the UK through organisations like the Law Society, but I would also hope, Alistair, the Law Society will scale it up. I think we have an opportunity to lead in the UK, a bit what can be done at a professional level. But let's take that, make it global. Let's connect as a legal community and make sure we're doing globally what can be done. And obviously we can collaborate internally within our businesses, within legal teams, and then within our businesses. So lots of scope for collaboration. One request, Adam, if I may, before I'm going over 30 seconds slightly, but please, law firms, collaborate as well, because there's some great content being produced, but it's all you know, I'm sure Rosemary's the same. We get bombarded. Please kind of combine your thinking a bit more. Because it's not, you know, we're not going to come to you necessarily because of what you're saying in your briefings. We're going to come to you because you're good climate lawyers. So get some great thinking, but let's collaborate. Lead us. Show us some leadership by collaborating more on the content.
I think that that second point you're allowed, because that was a very good second point there. Thank you, Anthony. And so, Rosemary, final point on collaboration.
Yes, I would just say. With the comparison of D&I is really interesting, and I think it's very valid. With D&I, I feel we all cluttered ourselves up by having too many similar but not quite the same sets of metrics, and then poor law firms have to do a huge job answering all these slightly different metrics for all their different clients. Maybe the law firms and the clients can come together and early on agree a set of metrics. I think Anthony gave a really good trio earlier on. So let's collaborate. Let's not have some sort of weird competitiveness going on.
Brilliant. Great final points. I'll hand over.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, on the note of collaboration, I think we've got to remember that this is the race to net zero. We can't let one of us pass the finish line first, then we all lose. We all need to pass this finish line of net zero together. Otherwise, you know, we must make sure, therefore, that our action is consistent across the board. And, you know, something that was mentioned earlier about legitimate net zero, this is the point of these COPs. What we've already seen is that Antonio Guterres said on the first day that he's going to be establishing a task force to establish strong international guidelines as to what exactly net zero is. And this will be an absolutely critical issue for all lawyers to think about as these things progress. And then something as well, which contextualized a lot of what Bessie was mentioning earlier, and I mentioned myself as well, that, you know, all lawyers are climate lawyers. But somebody said to me today that, you know, they had a warehouse on the side of a river, and owing to unprecedented flooding levels, it went up, and all of the stock that was ruined inside of it. And they just said, we wish we had a conveyancing lawyer to advise upon this. And this is just something which wouldn't be said many years ago. And on top of this, this was in Manchester. You know, this isn't in, you know, a country in the global south where we think is perhaps more prone to flood risk. This is a relevant issue for lawyers, all lawyers within the United Kingdom. And consequently, you know, that's why we really, really want to make sure that the Law Society is taking a leading stance on all of this to help solicitors horizon scan to what they will have to advise on as the climate crisis progresses. So that's some closing remarks from me there. Would you like to provide any closing remarks?
So, thank you. That was the final baton pass, because what we're going to have now is I'll provide my kind of closing remarks for this part of the webinar, which was the joint Law Society Lawyers for Net Zero. But then Lawyers for Net Zero, it never sleeps. So we're actually got Professor Paul Watchman, who is waiting for us patiently, who's going to be providing his response to what's been talked about both in this webinar, what was talked about in the webinar that we hosted earlier today with Legal 500, and also what's been happening in COP26, particularly in light of the fact that we're on Finance Day today, particularly important day. But just to finalize my comments is that absolutely delighted to have heard everything that we've got from Vesselina, from Rosemary and Anthony. So thank you so much for your time and your commitment to come along to this, because obviously they didn't just turn up today at 3 o'clock. They've done quite a lot of work beforehand to make sure that we had a good, smooth day. Thank you everybody for your patience as Alasdair and I had to do our ear baton passing. And also thank you to Marion, who's been doing our technical support in the background. And obviously, I personally would love it if people kind of took more practical action to deliver net zero, whether that be through the influencing, through the championing, or through contracts such as chancery lane clauses, and whether that's through the guidance and support that the Law Society gives you with the climate change resolution, or join the working group, or get involved somehow, or if you're an in-house lawyer, you can also get involved with Lawyers for Net Zero. So you can contact me through LinkedIn, Adam Woodhall, or Lawyers for Net Zero. You can follow our page.